Welcome to the next module of the Freedom Ticket. This is the one everybody wants to know about because it's how much money do I need to actually start this business? It's the number one question I get. What do I need to actually start selling on Amazon? How much cash do I need? How do I budget? How do I figure out the fees and how much profit am I going to actually make? So that's what we're going to talk about right now. There is no fixed amount of money that you actually need to start selling on Amazon. You could start with a few $100. You could start with 500, 1,000, 20,000, 100,000. There is no fixed number or minimum number, but the more you have, the better your chance of growing quickly and the better your chance of success. If you start with $500, you're going to be pretty limited in what you can do. And you might be able to take that $500, turn it into 600, turn the 600 into 800, and over time, slowly grow that up. But if you start with $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, you're going to have a much more options on what you can sell, and you're going to have a lot more flexibility in the direction you go and how fast you grow. So I recommend you start with a minimum of $5,000, absolute minimum. If you can do 10 to 20, that's way better. But 5,000 I would not consider selling on Amazon, really, especially if you're in the Western world for less than a $5,000 investment. It's just not going to be probably worth your time, and it's going to be very difficult. Now, you'll hear stories out there of people on YouTube and different places that said, "Oh, I started with $100 and now I'm doing $20 million a year on Amazon." That's BS. They might have started with $100, but they don't tell you that they put some stuff on their credit card. They don't tell you that 2 weeks later their rich uncle gave them a bunch of money. Those are stories that are pure BS. There's more to the story than that, so don't believe that stuff. It doesn't happen. You might start with $100 selling arbitrage and buying stuff at the dollar store and flipping it, and maybe you slowly built that up over time. So they'll say I started with $100, now I'm doing 20 million, but they don't tell you the full story. So be careful of those kinds of things when you hear that. It also depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to make a living off of this, or you're just trying to make a side hustle, it'll depend on how much money you need as well. But the number one thing when you're sourcing products, and we talked about that in the last module of how to find and source products, is going after products that you can actually afford to do. A lot of times using the tools like X-Ray and Black Box, you'll find opportunities and they look great, but you actually can't afford to do them because you're not coming into this with enough of an investment. So the rule of thumb that I go with is a 2.5. So if I've got $10,000 to invest in this business, and that's what I'm starting with, your product that you source should be no more than $4,000 landed cost. What does that landed cost mean? What's that mean? So I take the $10,000 I have to invest, I divide it by 2.5. That's $4,000. So the cost of my manufacturing of the product, plus the cost of the shipping, plus the cost of the taxes and anything else I've got to pay to my freight forwarder, all those costs to get it to the United States, to get it from the factory to Amazon, are what's called the landed cost. It doesn't include your fixed costs, like the cost of a mold or the cost of creating the packaging or paying your designer. These are the actual variable manufacturing costs. That's called landed costs. When you add all those up together, and that needs to not be more than $4,000. So what does that mean? That means that if you've got $4,000 out of your $10,000 you're going to use on this first order, what kind of product can you actually look for to search? And this is going to make a difference, like in Black Box. If you watch what Bradley did in the last module, showing you how to use Black Box, where you can put in parameters, this is going to make a difference on how much you pay per product and how well this product is doing for you to compete. For example, let's take the $4,000. Let's assume you have a 25% Trump tariff on that, and maybe another, 5% just regular duty that's being charged to it. So you're paying 30% on top of whatever your manufacturing cost is. And let's say your shipping cost on this is $500. Let's just I'm just making these numbers up. So that's $4,000 minus the $500. So you're at $3,500. And then out of that $3,500, there's, let's say, another $500 for fees, brokerage fees and freight forwarder fees and whatnot. So now we're at $3,000. So out of the $3,000, 30% of that, because I said 25% is a Trump tariff and 5% is the duty, 30% of that is roughly tax. So you can back off the 30% of that. So now we're at about 20, just doing math in my head here, about $2,300 or so. So that means that your manufactured cost needs to be $2,300. So when you're looking at tools like X-Ray or Black Box, and it shows for you to compete on this product and to actually be, let's say you're shooting for spot number 4 in the rankings, and spot number 4 is selling 10 units per day of this item, and you've talked to your factory and you said, I want to, they'd say it takes a month to make the product, another month to ship it to you. So you got, let's call it 2.5 months worth of what's called lead time from the time you place the order to the time you actually have the physical products in the Amazon warehouse to sell. Let's just make it 3 months to make the math easier. So it's 3 months. So that means you need a 3-month supply of product. So you've got the $2,300 and you need a 3-month supply selling $10 a day. So, I'm sorry, not $10, 10 units a day. So that's basically 300 units per month, or 900 units. So that's basically an order, like we said earlier, of 1,000 units. So let's just call it 1,000 units to account for some that you're going to use for promotion and giveaways and samples and stuff. So that's 1,000 units. So that means that you need to find a product, because you only have $2,300 left out of that 4,000 after you've backed out the taxes and the shipping fees and everything. You need to find a product that's going to cost you no more than $2.30 to manufacture. That's your budget to manufacture this product. So with that, so that's going to limit you on what you can do and which products you need to be able to look at. And so that's an important thing, that the step that everybody messes up on. And if you can get this right, your chances of succeeding triple or quadruple, go way up. So that's the math that you got to do. Now, why not spend more of that $10,000? You're like, I got 10 grand. Why, Kevin? Why don't you only spend $4,000? It's because you're gonna have some other fees. You're gonna have a helium-10 fee. You're gonna have some other inspection, other fees that come along. So probably $1,000 of that's going to get used up by that. And then you're going to need money for the next order. So the next order, if you're successful selling these and you start selling your units, and instead of 10 a day, you're like, holy cow, these are selling 15 a day. I hit on something here. I'm actually can make some money on this thing. It's actually working. You're going to have to call up the factory or WeChat them and say, hey, fire up the presses. I need more. It takes you 3 months to get these in. I'm going to sell all of these in less than 3 months. I'm going to sell all of these in 2 months. Get some more on the way. Because the absolute worst thing you can do on Amazon is run out of stock. If you're successful and start the momentum of selling, and you go out of stock for more than a couple days, you are DOA. And so what happens is you run out of stock because you are on top of your inventory and on top of your cash. And when you actually get back in stock, let's say you're out of stock for a month. Well, in the meantime, there's a bunch of other people that have come in, they've taken your place in line. And you can't cut back in line. You're going to be at the end of the line and starting all over again and spending money to try to launch it. And all that work you did at the beginning was just wasted. You don't want to get in that situation, and that's why 95% of the people fail, because they get in situations like that. So you want to avoid that. So that means you need to have some of that extra money so that in 2 weeks into this, when you're like, holy cow, this is doing better than I expected, you have money to pay that extra 30% deposit and get the ball rolling. And this time, instead of ordering 1,000 units, you're probably going to have to order, depending on what the math works out to be, maybe 1,500 or 2,000 units. So it's going to be a bigger order, and you're going to need more money. So you need that money sitting there so that you can do this and keep this flywheel going. Or you got to have a rich uncle that you can call up and say, hey, bud, I need 10 grand really fast. So if you got that guy on speed dial and he's ready to go, then okay, then you can spend more of that 10 grand. But this is a very important thing. I want you to go back and replay this 5 times and listen to everything I just said, write down the examples I just said, because this is crucial, 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 crucial to your success. And this is where a lot of people make a big screw up. And so whether it's your first product or you're watching this and you've been doing lots of products, you need to go by this formula. And it's going to increase your chances of success dramatically. Another thing you got to look at is margins and cash flow. You're going to have to, your initial investment, you're going to keep reinvesting it. So probably for the first 2, 3, 4 orders, maybe, you're going to keep reinvesting your profits. So whatever profits you make, you're going to be reinvesting it because you're probably going to be ordering more each time as you grow. And always consider unexpected expenses. There's going to be something, right at the time of this filming, there's issues in the Red Sea. And so there's shipping rates have gone, especially going into Europe, have gone through the roof because of attacks on cargo ships and stuff in the Red Sea. So those types of things happen. So always have a little bit of a buffer or miscellaneous to cover that kind of stuff. Again, on the pricing on your products, I don't recommend you sell anything under $15. It's just a race to the bottom on those. It's a numbers game. It's sell thousands of units to make 10 cents a unit. It's difficult. There's no margins. If you're trying to make a living off of this and do a real business, I don't recommend you do that. I recommend that $50 to $100 range, or at least above $20. I personally have never sold anything below $20, and I never will. 1995, basically it's $20. That's the lowest I will go. But the margins on that product are huge. Like I said earlier, another module, it's 14 times my cost that I'm selling it for. So that's a really good margin. Always avoid saturated markets. Seek the less competitive markets. Higher priced items sometimes can actually be better than lower priced items. Everybody thinks Amazon is a low price marketplace. That's not true. It is true for commodities. So for basic necessities, where there's no differentiation, it's all about price. But if you establish the branding and do some of what we said for establishing branding, and actually can justify your price with imagery and with videos and with your content, your listing, and the quality, people will pay more. You'll sell less. The higher you charge, probably the fewer units you will sell, but you can make more money per unit. So in the long term, a lot of times, by selling less, you can actually make more. So don't get caught up in this numbers game as I got to sell more, I got to be a bestseller. BSR, bestseller rank, is something that's on Amazon. A lot of people get caught up in that. It's a vanity number. I have my BSR is 372 in pets. Oh, great, good for you. My BSR is 3,900. I bet I'm making a lot more money than you are. Just because you're selling more units doesn't mean you're making more money. So always know your margins and know your numbers. Keep in mind, this is a cash-intensive business as well. So you got to start out with realistic expectations and map out how you want to grow. Your product selection and the profitability on that is super, super important, especially when it comes down to when you sell your business, which we're going to talk about in the next portion of this module, about why you should actually be thinking about selling from day one. But this is a cash-intensive business. Selling physical products is not like selling courses online where you're selling digital air. You're selling physical things that have to move around, that have weight to them, and it's cash intensive. So your cash flow is super, super important. And if you're not on top of your cash flow, if you're not a numbers person, partner with somebody, maybe your spouse or your business partner is a numbers person, or hire someone that's a numbers person, because if you're not on top of your numbers, you're just playing with fire, and you're not gonna do well. It's all in those details of the numbers. Now, there's someone, Arnold is going to be joining this module to show you some spreadsheets on how to actually do forecasting and actually how these numbers matter. But some of the key things that you need to understand when it comes to cash flow is you want to minimize your inventory. You don't want to order too much, and you don't want to order too little. So it's like a delicate balance. So on Amazon, you want to typically have at least 30 days worth of inventory at all times. And Amazon just recently actually started a new fee where they're charging you if you actually dip too low. So if your inventory levels go too low, beyond below certain thresholds, they're actually charging you a penalty, because Amazon knows that when you ship it in, it costs them more money. They got to rush a bunch of them around to their distribution centers. When you send it in, they got to rush them around. It's costing them money. So they're trying to encourage sellers to get on top of your inventory. And it's crucial that you stay on top of that. Amazon fees can add up. Your storage fees can add up based on the size of your item, how many units you have in there. If you have them in the fourth quarter, it costs a lot more than if you have them the rest of the year. They charge a surcharge for the fourth quarter. So those things, I've heard people getting bills for $30,000 or more just because they had excess inventory sitting in an Amazon warehouse. So what a lot of people like to do is they use what's called a 3PL, or third-party logistics, and they will feed the stuff in. So they'll store everything where it's cheaper in a third-party warehouse, like some random warehouse, and then they'll have instructions that every week send in a little bit more to Amazon, so you don't get hit with all these huge storage fees and moving fees and low inventory fees. There's even companies like SKUDrop that are based in China that will store your items in China, and then every week they will ship them over. So it's cheaper to store them in China at the factory location than it is a lot of times in the U.S., but they've got special ships and special containers that are bringing combined loads. So they'll bring 100 of your items and 27 of somebody else's and 390 of somebody else's and 7,000 of somebody else's, put them all in one container, save money, and ship them in every week and feed them in. It's called just-in-time inventory, and that's what Amazon wants. They don't want to be your warehouse. They want to be your fulfillment center. And so all their fees are oriented towards making sure that they're just doing the fulfillment part, not being your storage. And so that's something that you got to keep in mind too. When you're talking with your suppliers, always try to get those MOQs down, so the minimum order quantities, but get pricing as if you order more, but be able to order less on your MOQs. You want to make sure on cash flow that you're and I think I actually back up 1 second on that. I think when you see the session on cash flow, you're going to see how a simple change in how much you order can drastically affect how much you either got to borrow or how much cash flow you got to cash. Your ordering sequences and your ordering flows can make huge differences in your cash cycles when it comes on Amazon. It's probably one of the biggest factors. And Arnold's going to show you that when he shows you these spreadsheets and how to do some of the forecasting, how working these MOQs in this just-in-time inventory system like with SKU can make huge differences in your cash flow and how much money you need to just run and scale this business, or how fast you can actually scale this business. Also in cash flow, you want to negotiate terms whenever possible with your supplier. You might not be able to do that on the first order, but once you've been ordering for a while, you should be able to negotiate some of the terms, especially if you've gone and visited them, and maybe even get terms where you pay after delivery, or you pay 10% down and then 40% when the order ships and the other 50% when it gets to the port of Los Angeles or Long Beach or something. But those kinds of things can help you. I've known people that have gotten 90-day terms from their suppliers, and it's made huge differences in allowing them to grow. Also keep track, we'll talk about this later in another module, but your PPC, your advertising spends, those things can get out of hand. And a lot of times people are just spending money just to spin wheels. And so you got to keep an eye on that kind of stuff. Sometimes there's tons of software. There's probably 1,000+ different types of software tools. The benefit you guys have, you're using Helium 10. It's got a lot of tools all built into one platform for one monthly fee, which is great. But try not to have 27 different tools out there that you're paying subscriptions for. Those things can add up. There are a few tools that maybe Helium 10 doesn't have that you might want to supplement with, but for the most part, Helium 10 has 90% of what you're going to need. And so just be very choosy and careful, and don't just follow little shiny objects when you see somebody advertising some new AI tool or some new cool tool. It may not be necessary. You also want to try to use other people's money whenever you can. Even the smartest people, Bill Gates and Musk and Bezos, as rich as they are, they still like to use other people's money. Use other people's money is one of the best things you can do. So if you can use other people's money, especially at a low interest rate or a zero interest rate, that's even better. Not having to give them equity is even better yet. But that can be a way to help you with cash flow. Also, you can lease assets instead of buying them. So if you got things you got a truck or something for your warehouse, or you got something leased stuff instead of buying, it can give you some advantages. There's only a few ways to actually make more money. That's either to reduce cost or increase price or sell more. Those are basically the three ways: sell more, increase the price, or lower the cost. And so those are things those three things you always need to be focusing on in all your metrics and all your numbers, is how can you achieve one or all three of those. Remember that traditional banks are kind of leery of e-commerce. They're getting better about it now, but so you might have to go to specialize. If you need financing, there's companies like SellersFi and other companies out there that specialize in lending for e-commerce and Amazon sellers. Be careful. There's some of them that are not really good. The loan rates, the interest rates are deceiving. So they'll tell you it looks like it's this rate, but if you look at it on an annualized basis, it's like pawn shop rates. So be careful. SellersFi is one of the better ones. Amazon Lending, once you qualify for Amazon Lending, Amazon will loan you money. It'll show up in your dashboard. You don't get to apply for it. SellersFi, you can go to apply once you've been selling for about 6 months or so. But on Amazon Lending, once you've been selling and meet some of their criteria, a little message will pop up and say, hey, we'd love to give you $50,000 Here's the payment terms. Which one do you want? Sometimes those can be good options. So truly analyze the interest on those, because some of those, the way they word them is a little bit misleading on what the interest rate really is, and that can really cut into your profit. So be careful on that. Typically, to get a loan, you're going to need to be at least 3 months, a lot of times 6 months in business. You're going to need to have a credit score in the U.S., a personal credit score, probably 620 or higher. You're going to need maybe even, you might even have to personally guarantee it. I try to avoid that if possible. But sometimes since you're a small business, you might have to personally guarantee it or put up some assets, but avoid that whenever possible. You can also use credit cards for cash flow. There's suppliers. There's a company called Melio, MELIO.com, where you can actually use your credit card to pay your supplier. They don't take a credit card, but you can use your credit. Melio charges like a 3% fee to do this, but sometimes that can be better than taking a loan or some of the other options. And then they will charge your credit card and then pay the supplier via wire transfer. There's also credit cards, like if you have good credit in the U.S., you can go to bankrate.com and you can sign up for 0% interest credit cards that maybe have 0% interest for 18 months or balance transfer fees. So there's lots of ways to actually generate some cash, especially if you have decent credit in the U.S. The cash flow is critical for your growth. From the time you start until you build your $1 million business, it's the number one thing that brings people down. It is managing the cash flow. And you're going to start, if you're successful, you're going to start dealing with big numbers. So you're going to deal with probably bigger numbers than you ever dealt with in your life. You're going to have deposits coming in of hundreds of thousands of dollars every 2 weeks from Amazon. And it's going to be like, wow, this is a lot of money. How to manage this? You got to get a grip on this. It's crucial for success. Some of the biggest factors are your gross profit margin, your growth rate, and your inventory cycle. So your gross profit margin is basically after you take all expenses away, what are you left with? What are you reporting on your taxes as the gross profit for the business after you've paid yourself? That right there is an important metric. Another one is the growth rate. How fast are you growing? 5% a year, 10% a year, 50% a year? And then your inventory cycle means how often do you turn over your inventory? Stores like Walmart, the retail stores, they turn over their inventory 8.3 times on average per year. So it means every month and a half or so, the whole inventory is basically, at least on paper, is cycling through, and they're selling through it. Some things might sit there for 4 months, but on average, every month and a half, everything is cycling through and they're replacing it. You want to get to a better inventory return, inventory turns. The higher that number, the better, because it means that you got cash coming in, and cash flow and the cash cycle is critical. It's not so much what you show. You can show a profit on your balance sheet, on your P&L, but that doesn't mean that you're a healthy business because you may have cash flow issues. So cash flow is number one. Fast growth requires working capital. So you either have to have really good terms from your supplier, you got to have access to money, or you got to have money yourself, or you got to be generating such high profit margins that you can self-sustain and float that cash flow. Typical margins are about 20 to 30%. So you want to have between 20 and 30% is what you want to be shooting for as your gross profit margin. When you're starting out, you're going to be really focused on profit accumulation, not expansion. Some people expand too fast. They get over their skis. So be careful not to expand too fast. Focus on getting that profitability dialed in before you really ramp up your growth and your expansion. Also, slow organic growth is preferred over a big capital injection. So if you can grow slower organically by reinvesting your profits than taking a huge lump sum of money to actually grow, you're probably going to be better off. And it's a little bit slower, but it's probably going to, in the end, make you more money. There's typically some stages when you're starting your Amazon business of the growth. You're basically initially when you're starting phase, your beginning phase, and then you're establishing a base. You're establishing, okay, now I've started and kind of figure out what works. These are the base numbers. So you have a baseline. And then once you get past the baseline, you're in a growth phase. And then once you pass the growth phase of really doubling down on that baseline and kind of maximizing it, then you're in expand. How do we expand this into other markets, other marketplaces or other product lines? But all this growth is tied to your cash flow and your access to capital. So this is This is, a lot of people in this business are doing 10 million, $100 million a year, and some of them don't have two nickels to rub together because they're not managing their cash flow. It's constantly in, constantly out, and they can't get a grip on it. Some of the biggest companies in this space have gone under that everybody thought were examples of really good companies. There's one in Brooklyn a few years ago that went under, that was doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year on Amazon, and they couldn't manage their cash flow right in their inventory cycles. They were it was just this mismanaged. It will kill you really, really fast. The ways to get money, like I said, you got a rich uncle, you have your own money set aside, you have Amazon lending, you have some outside banks, SBA loans in some cases, credit cards, or getting better terms from your suppliers are some of the best ways to get money. Now, when you're selling on Amazon, there's a bunch of fees you need to be aware of that Amazon's going to be charging you. Remember I said earlier that FBA is the preferred method, and the FBA fees fulfilled by Amazon fees are as high as they may sound. They're actually not bad because you're going to struggle to actually ship items yourself and fulfill them yourself for those same fees. But Amazon typically takes about a 15% commission as their base commission, and then they charge you a per unit fulfillment fee. And that will range depending on the size, the weight, the dimensions of the item. They have a whole bunch of classifications you can see on the Amazon website that show you a breakdown. One of the things to keep in mind is when you're doing your product sourcing and development, one slight change in the size of a package can make a huge difference in those fees. So if you're able to condense the package, sometimes as much by a half an inch, you're able to shave off half an inch on the size of the package, it can make a huge difference in your profitability and the fees that Amazon charge you. So get engineering the sizing of your packaging to fit within those fees, and you got to include the box that Amazon puts it in as part of that sizing. You got to add in the weight of that box too, which adds about 4 ounces typically on average. You got to factor those things in. Those are critical things. So engineering that, and that's why you see a lot of times when you buy something, it's in 27 parts and it's in a little small box, and you got to open it up and you got to build the thing yourself in your house. It's because they're engineering it down to get to the smallest possible package to save money, and you got to keep that stuff in mind. Millimeters can make a difference in the cost. Amazon has, when you first set up an account, they may set some storage limits for you. Depends on the account. Sometimes it's 1,000 units, sometimes it's 3,000 units, sometimes it's more, but you may not be able to just ship in as much as you want. And then over time, Amazon kind of analyzes how much you're selling, and they will adjust those numbers based on your sales volume. So it's not always unlimited storage. Some older accounts have unlimited storage, but most newer accounts don't have unlimited storage. So you may have you may hit some thresholds there or some limits. You can always ask for them to increase those if you're selling really well. But that's something to keep in mind. When you ship into Amazon, Amazon has preferred rates with like UPS and with trucks, like LTL trucks, less than truckload or full truckloads. You can pay to ship it in yourself on your own accounts, but a lot of times Amazon's fees are so low that it's better just to use Amazon's preferred shipping and let Amazon deduct that from your costs. So I can ship a box of like one of my calendars for $8.50 into Amazon. If I use my own UPS account to ship that, it would cost me like $16. So take advantage of those kinds of things. Keep in mind that there's storage fees. Amazon has monthly storage fees and they have long-term storage fees. So if something is, a bunch of units are stuck in the warehouse and not moving, you're going to get hit with a massive fee for Amazon just collecting dust for you in their warehouse. So you want to make sure you get rid of stuff, either liquidate it if something's not selling, donate it if something's not selling, or put it on sale, do lightning deals or some of the deals. Amazon, when you go to ship into Amazon too, whether it's the preferred rates or you're shipping it yourself, they'll oftentimes tell you to ship to multiple places, or they'll give you an option to ship to one place for an extra fee. But they're in the process of constantly changing this, and so you got to stay on top of how these fees work, whether you ship into one or you ship into multiple, and Amazon's going to more of a regional distribution network. It used to be they had what's called cross docks, and you'd ship into one like a cross dock, and these didn't store anything. They'd just basically be kind of internal Amazon distribution centers, and then they would feed it out. Or sometimes Amazon would store stuff in a warehouse in Houston and some stuff in a warehouse in California. And if somebody ordered in New York all the way across the country, one of those two warehouses would ship it to them, either by air or Prime Air or by commercial air or whatever. And Amazon's gone to a more regional system, like a hub and spoke system, like the airlines have hubs, like American has hubs in Chicago and Los Angeles and Dallas and Miami and Charlotte and New York, for example. So it's more of a regional system. And so if your inventory is not in that regional system, they won't even show that it's available for sale. So if someone in New York is trying to order your dog bowl and it's not in a local warehouse in New York, it's only in a warehouse in California, Amazon won't even show it a lot of times as available, or it'll show some really long extended date. And so being on top of where you're shipping things in, and Amazon's in the process of changing stuff all the time on this, pay attention to that, where it's actually having you send things. And you may have to split up some of your shipments to optimize your deliverability and your availability and your discoverability on Amazon. Amazon has something called an IPI score, which they keep moving the number of what the minimum score is, but you want to keep that as high as possible, because if that score goes too low, they'll start penalizing you and not letting you ship as much stuff in. So the score is based on a number of factors, like how often you're shipping stuff in, how many problems you have that they're having to deal with. When you say you shipped in 100 and they only got 26 because your guys couldn't count, or they will do all kinds of how late you are on shipping or how often you stay in stock. There's a whole plethora of things that make up the score, but it's an important score to keep keep an eye on. Remember that you can use a 3PL for flexibility, and a lot of times 3PLs make sense. You can go to hub.helium10.com and you can find some 3PLs that are out there. There's a bunch of them around the country. And sometimes it makes more sense to store your big pallets and mass amounts of things at one of these 3PLs and then slowly feed them in to the Amazon warehouses. It can make a difference. Check-in times, though, you have to factor in, too, how long it takes to check something in. You get some of these warehouses for Amazon, these trucks, these trailers sit outside for sometimes 3 weeks before the items get checked in. And you're just like, I sent in 1,000 units and it says they're not available on Amazon. It says transferring, or it says in progress or something in their Seller Central. And it's just because these warehouses are backed up. Some of them are notorious for it. Other ones are very efficient. So you got to factor those kinds of things. There's software tools that will show you which ones are average check-in times and stuff. Sometimes UPS grounds can be the best way that the stuff gets checked in faster. Or you can use companies like I mentioned, SKU Drop, that will drip stuff in. They'll store it in China for you, and then they'll strip it into Amazon in the U.S. or Amazon. I think they're now also doing Europe as well, parts of Europe as well. They'll drip it in. That can be a very cost-effective and efficient system. And you tie in your Seller Central, and they monitor everything, and they have algorithms that will figure it out. It can be really, really good. So staying on top of your inventory and your shipping is a crucial thing. And knowing lead times, Christmas time, you get really heavy. A lot of times they'll say if you want stuff for Black Friday or Cyber Monday, which is typically the third, fourth week of November, you got to have inventory in by, Amazon will announce it, but by November 1st, the latest. It's got to be actually checked in, sometimes even sooner than that. If you don't, you risk a chance of customers not being able to order your items. When you look into your inventory on Amazon and Seller Central, they'll classify it in several different classifications. They'll say in stock, which means it's available and ready to ship to a customer right then. They'll also sometimes say processing, which means they're in the middle of counting it, opening up your boxes and sorting it out with the robots and putting it in its place. Other times they'll say transferring, and that means they're moving it from one warehouse to another. Maybe you send in 50 units to the Dallas warehouse. And all of Amazon's warehouses, by the way, are airport codes. So it's the same as the local airport codes. So it's DFW3 or something for Dallas. And maybe they got 50 units, but Amazon's algorithm has figured out that we don't need to keep all 50 units in Dallas. We need to send 6 of them to College Station, 7 of them to Austin, 15 of them to Corpus Christi, and 3 of them to El Paso. So they'll put them on their own trucks and move stuff around to get it closer to the customer based on their algorithm. That's when it's transferring. And when that happens, if a lot of your inventory gets stuck in that state because you got behind in shipping it in, then when the customer goes on, instead of it saying delivers in a day or two, it'll say delivers next week, or it'll have some future date. And that can hurt your conversion rates because customers are like, it says it's instead of coming tomorrow, it's going to come in 4 days. I'll just order somebody else's product instead that's going to be here tomorrow because I need it tomorrow because I'm going on vacation or something. So those are things that you got to keep in mind when it comes to inventory. It's a lot of hats you got to wear here, a lot of things you got to think about, but I know you can do it, and we're just getting started. So let's talk about in the next module how to actually prepare your business to sell it.